Welcome to the Brother Ill Show. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Holy Day to all Muslims all across the world. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. We're going to take a deep dive into to bringing you an update on the world's war, basically the wars that's going on, the global conflicts between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and the threat, not threat, but we talked about, or President Trump talked about, not just President Trump, but McGregor, Colonel McGregor here. Um, this is way early on when this stuff first broke out. A couple things that would eventually end up into a wider regional war, or Israel warring with the entire region. Um, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna take this call. Then yes, sir.
Sudden penetration that could not be halted. I think it's one of the reasons that you saw this clip of President or Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was actually shaking as he read his speech. I think the whole experience frightened him. He's obviously recovered from his shakes, and now I think he's pressing ahead to throw everything he's got against Iran in the hopes that he can do so much damage that Iran won't be able to strike back. I think that's unlikely, and also because he thinks he's going to destabilize the Iranian regime.
Does the IDF have the ability to reach Iran without refueling? Do they have missiles that can travel the same distance that the Iranian missiles can travel?
I suspect they do. The question is how many? I don't know. They are primarily reliant on their air power. And you're right, for them to launch a significant.
Okay, so what I was saying, sorry about that, but what I was saying was this has been an ongoing observation from us and people around the world. Colonel McGregor here is continuously been guiding us through this thing as this thing has been happening in real time. And so we talked about the threat of a regional war, which Israel would not be able to withstand, and the existence of Israel would be in question. And it appears as if, just like he said, that's happening. Now you got Iran into it, you got Lebanon, you got Hezbollah, you got, if he's going to break it down, it's basically where you got the House of Islam, and they're coming together and nobody's willing to stand by. So now you have the threat, not just the threat, but it's on the floor with a greater regional conflict. He even mentions how we all was thinking that October 7th couldn't happen without, it raised a lot of questions basically. So we've been keeping track of this thing, and because it's basically like it's no way that could have had went down the way it went down with the kind of technology that they claim to have, the kind of military presence that they have in the region, they supposedly have the best intelligence outfit in the world. And so we can see that intuition has not just been in the minds, but it's kind of materializing because it shows a continued effort to grow this conflict to a larger scale. And it's being totally financed. It's being totally financed by us. So, let's continue to watch.
An airstrike, they need air refueling support. Right now, I think we've got at least 80 to 90% of all the air refueling assets in the U.S. Air Force in the region. So I'm sure that we'll support them with air refueling. They had planned earlier to land in Azerbaijan and then launch their strikes from there. But I think the Azeri Turks said, nope, that can't be done under the current circumstances.
Colonel, a year after October 7th, is Israel stronger and more stable, weaker and less stable, or something in between?
No, I think we have to understand a couple of things. Large numbers of Israelis have left the place. One wonders if they'll ever return. They may not. So I think we have to accept the very high probability that Israel is dramatically weaker. They're entirely dependent upon billions of dollars from the United States to keep them afloat economically, entirely dependent upon us for ammunition and weapon system support. This is why you hear people.
Is a Bitcoin ETF the same as owning Bitcoin directly? While Bitcoin ETFs might offer a familiar face, they lack the true ownership and flexibility of direct.
Repeatedly saying that we are complicit in the various atrocities which the Israelis have committed in the name of defense.
We are complicit. We have financed those atrocities, and there doesn't seem to be relief in sight, no matter who wins the election in November.
Oh, I think that's true. I would say there is a difference, though, between Ukraine and the United States, or
Yes.
Ukraine and Israel. Ukraine really has been a stalking horse for the neocons in Washington, the fools that thought they could pulverize Russia into submission. And I think the CIA and MI6 are continuing to run the show in Kiev. I think we're going to see some more deep strikes. There have been lots of ISR flights from private or civilian aircraft who are contracted normally with JSOC in the United States, and they've been flying back and forth along the edge of Russia in order to gather data. I think we're going to see more of that. And so if anybody in Washington tells you, well, we've told the Ukrainians not to do this, well, they may say that publicly, but privately, the CIA and MI6 are in charge, and they have carte blanche to do pretty much whatever they want, short of a nuclear strike. Now, when you go to the Middle East, it's an entirely different set of circumstances. Mr. Netanyahu is very definitely in charge. We are not. And it's clear that we are not, because you've heard all of these pleas, either leaked or stated publicly, to the Israelis, asking them not to hit this or that target array. I don't think Mr. Netanyahu gives a damn what anybody tells him in Washington right now, because he controls everything. He controls the Hill. That's vital. So nobody from the Senate or the House is going to stand up and restrain him from doing anything. And he's got control for all intents and purposes of most of the U.S. armed forces. Now, there may be some out there who think that we will only engage if Israel is the subject of attack. We will see. But I think we're going to have to support the Israelis in their attack on Iran, or the Israelis might as well write it off.
Does Netanyahu face any chance of the spigot being turned off if he continues to thumb his nose at the White House?
It's doubtful, as you pointed out, because their assumption is if for some reason they have to pause and not ratchet up the intensity of the war, then it's only temporary, because if President Trump wins, they are confident that he will come in and give them 100% support to do whatever they want.
I guess they're confident on the same happening if Vice President Harris wins.
Yeah, I think so, although they'd be more comfortable with President Trump. I mean, you've seen President Trump is very demonstrable in his support for Israel, and more important, his support for Jews in the United States in his public behavior. So I think they given the choice, Judge, I think they'd much rather have President Trump. But you're right. Even if President Harris is reelected, the pressure inside her administration and from their donors, some of whom are the same or at least overlap, they'll continue this. There's no question about it. The only way out of this, and this is very important, the only way out of this is for the people in the region to fight back. And let's be frank, to date, there hasn't been much in the category of fight back. In other words, most of the Arab states have sat there and taken the insults and the bombings. I don't think that's going to go on much longer. But this is my point on the Little Bighorn moment. All of the tribes eventually gathered for that large battle, but it took a long time for those various tribes to put aside their differences and show up. And if Custer hadn't been looking for them, he might have not have found them at all.
Hmm.
So the Israelis have turned this revenge campaign for what happened on the 7th of October, even though, as we discussed in the past, I have serious doubts about 7th October happening without Israeli collusion. And it's a tragedy, but I really think the evidence is mounting that supports that contention. But whatever they started out to do, at least in theory, is irrelevant now. This has become truly a kill or be killed war, a war of annihilation waged against the House of Islam. And the House of Islam is going to have to come to terms with that and decide whether or not it plans to survive. I think they're getting closer and closer to the kind of unity that will spell the end of Israel. But I think the time when everyone was willing to sit by and watch it happen and do nothing is over.
Tell me about Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is he a reliable person? Is he an honest person? Does he?
Here's the difference between a business that makes $1 million a year and $10 million a year from their Meta, TikTok, YouTube ads. It's this simple: print tracking and AI. What does that mean?
He have his own interests ahead of his country, or his country's interest ahead of him? I realize this is a multiple question. Forgive me. You attack it however you see fit, Colonel. This is like you're back at West Point. I'm sorry.
We didn't get multiple choice questions in the old days. You had
my point is, does he know the damage that he's doing to Israel? Ambassador Freeman says Israel has become its own worst enemy.
Well, of course, I agree with him, but that's because of Netanyahu's supporters. If you are Netanyahu, you have promised the population that is electing you that you are going to, quote unquote, annihilate all of their enemies. In other words, the proposition is Israel will only be safe when it is devoid of any Muslim Arabs or Arabs, period. That's the first thing. And its external enemies, principally at this point in time, Hezbollah and ultimately Iran, are destroyed. That has to be understood. That's the way they see it. So they talk about a five-front war. You have the various militias in Iraq and Syria. You have the Houthi militias. You have the problems inside Gaza and the West Bank. You have Hezbollah. So you're engaged in a multi-front war that is a win or be destroyed outcome. It's very similar to, frankly speaking, Hitler in the last part of the Second World War. There were many opportunities, even within the first couple of months of invading the Soviet Union, for him to accept several possible deals that at least would have suspended fighting for some period of time. He rejected everything. And I think we have Netanyahu, who has fundamentally rejected any negotiation, any compromise of any kind, on the grounds that he has control of us. I think that's the key variable. Everybody says it, but I don't think they understand how important it is. He's got control of us. Our armed forces are with him. He has a limitless supply of munitions and weapons and rockets. He's got U.S. forces already integrated with his to conduct the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance operations, the overhead surveillance. We are cooperating with him at sea. He thinks he's in the driver's seat. He's convinced himself that he can win. However, I think he's also taken the position, Judge, that if he can't win, he'll go down fighting. So this is kind of the same thing in April 45 in Berlin. Either we win or we all die.
President Macron of France just 4 days ago made an interesting comment, a criticism of the United States and of Prime Minister Netanyahu with respect to ceasefire. I'm going to play the clip in a minute, but nobody talks about negotiations for ceasefire anymore. Does that mean that people like Amos Hochstein and McGurk, I forgot his first name, forgive me, and Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, have recognized that they were duped into believing that Netanyahu would seriously negotiate for a ceasefire, or they've been outed as being complicit in Netanyahu's never being serious about negotiating for a ceasefire? If you could address that before I run President Macron.
I think complicit is the right answer. Most of these people, if you go back to Ambassador Jeffries, who was operating in the Levant, in Syria, Lebanon, and so forth, he actively subverted any attempt by President Trump to withdraw forces from the region. I think all of these people are complicit. They are part of the conspiracy to drag us into war in the Middle East.
Here is President Macron. Chris, cut number one.
I regret that Prime Minister Netanyahu made a difficult choice and took on this responsibility, in particular for ground operations on Lebanese soil. And so, yes, if we call for a ceasefire, the consistent thing to do is not to supply weapons of war. And I don't think that those who are supplying them can call for a ceasefire every day and continue to supply them.
An interesting backhand at Joe Biden. You can't call for a ceasefire at the same time you're paying for the opposite.
Of course. Well, the same thing is also true in Ukraine. So there's no evidence for any fundamental course change coming anytime soon. We're going to be bystanders at the destruction, I think, of Israel and final annihilation of this regime in Kiev.
Colonel, I want to play for you a question that was put to Matt Miller, the spokesperson for the State Department. It's a long question. It's about a minute and a half long. But the young reporter who posed it, in my view, offered a brilliant summary of the duplicity and failure to accept responsibility of the current State Department. Cut number 7.
So Israel is still poised to strike Iran. And in July, Blinken said that Iran was 1 to 2 weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. So I guess for all we know, they might have one by now. And meanwhile, in Ukraine, they've struck deep within Russian territory several times, as deep as 300 miles from the border. And in that case, we don't have to guess. We know that Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet.
I just made a $27 ebook in 2 minutes using AI. Watch how I did it so you can do it too. Here.
Planted as many as 6,000 warheads. And so one of the risks of arming militaries that are striking in the territories of nuclear powers is that one of those gets deployed and then it could escalate very quickly from there. So it's rarely discussed, but it's important to address that the nuclear risk is real, and it could very abruptly mean the end of, what humans have worked for thousands of years to collectively achieve. And us today are very lucky to live with the fruits of that achievement. And I feel like we're treating the risks kind of brazenly. So my question for you is, we often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, I mean, what gives you the right to lecture others?
They say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. Well, the same goes for protecting your health and wealth. Don't worry if you haven't planted that tree yet. We've got you covered with the right tools to secure your future now. Here at Book Brother L Consulting Services, we deliver the guidance you need to thrive, leveraging exclusive health, income support, and supplemental insurance solutions through our expert partners in the industry. Our approach is data-driven and calculated to ensure your well-being and business success. Did you know unexpected health issues causes financial stress in 60% of U.S. households, according to the CDC? With Book Brother L Consulting Services, we guide you through health income supplemental insurance options that protect your income during those unforeseen medical events. Picture this. Knowing that even if a health issue strikes, your income remains intact. Supplemental health insurance through our expert partners gives you the peace of mind you deserve. Forbes report that 48% of workers without supplemental insurance struggle to cover medical costs. Let us fill that gap, ensuring you're always protected. Income protection is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. With 33% of U.S. households lacking any form of income protection, according to the U.S. Treasury. Supplemental insurance ensures financial stability in tough times, whether it's accident or illness coverage. We got your back. At Book Brother Ill Consulting Services, we don't just protect your health and income. Our consulting services help you make smarter, data-backed decisions that grows your wealth. Forbes even shows that businesses working with business experts, mentors, financial experts grow 25% faster than those that don't. Combine this with income support, and you're set for long-term security. So why wait? Head over to www.brotherill.com and book your consultation today. Whether you're seeking business development, AI integration, or financial leverage strategies, we've got the expertise to guide you. And with our exclusive health and income solutions through our expert partners, you're not just securing your business, you're securing your future. As the old saying goes, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So let's create a future filled with prosperity and security together. Book your consultation now with Brother L, where your health, wealth, and future are always protected. They say
shit in here. I mean, like, it is a genocide. You are abetting it,
question.
and you
Go ahead.
are risking nuclear
Go ahead.
war in Ukraine for this
Plenty of
proxy
other
war.
places to give a speech. Go ahead.
First, what did you think of the young man's question? And second, what did you think of, sorry, of the State Department response?
Let's be frank, the man was spot on. He's right. The only thing I would add right now is Americans need to wake up. They need to understand that the response to the first hurricane that came through recently and the devastation that it wrought was abysmal. The administration continues to perform badly. FEMA has been a joke. The population, the American population suffering in places like Asheville, Eastern Tennessee, and other areas are wondering if there is any real leadership in Washington that gives a damn. And I think Americans need to look at this because I would argue they don't. They're pouring far more money and resources into caring for illegals, providing them with free health care, free housing, moving them all around the country to make it difficult to eventually expel them in the future. And at the same time that we are being devastated by illegal immigration and weather, we're being dragged into arguably a situation in both Ukraine and certainly in the Middle East where we could end up in a nuclear confrontation because the Russians are deadly serious about Iran. They are not going to abandon Iran. We seem to overlook that. We seem to act as though it doesn't mean anything. And we continue to pretend that everyone in the region is a backward fool. Now we have the Turks that are on their way to the Lebanese waters. They're going to evacuate their citizens. They're armed to the teeth. I don't know what the Israelis are going to do, but they were so brazen and arrogant in their attacks on Russian facilities in Syria. I would not be surprised if something similar did not happen with the Turks. I think everybody's had it with this unrestrained violence from Israel. And they've had it with us because we've done nothing about it. But now it could go nuclear. And we've always known that this was in the background. But all we can do is hope that cooler minds prevail in Washington. But if Israel gets into the position I think it is headed, this little bighorn.
If you want to pass your challenge and get funded as soon as possible, then listen up. We will pass challenge for you.
Moment, the temptation to use that is going to be overwhelming. Meanwhile, here at home, Americans are focused correctly on what happened during the hurricanes and the new one that's coming through right now that's about to devastate more of Florida. And potentially, I mean, we don't know where it'll go. It could cross and go east, north, west, south, whatever. I understand that, but Americans need to pay attention This is not some fulfillment, as they think, of prophecy. This is a disaster, period, that confronts us. We've walked right into the bear trap. We need to get out of it. But to do that, we have to pull the plug on Netanyahu, and we need to pull the plug on Zelensky. Of the two, I think ultimately we'll pull the plug on Zelensky long before Netanyahu, and it may be too late at that stage.
Colonel, is there any respect internationally amongst diplomats for the United States Department of State?
I think everyone all over the world has become accustomed to being bullied or lied to by us for a long time. We were given the benefit of the doubt, I think, for many years, even when President Trump was in, and we saw everything he wanted to do actively subverted by the people around him. People in the international system said, well, you know, we understand. We think President Trump really does care and is trying to do the right thing. So I think a lot of people gave us a pass. I think those days are over. There's no more pass. And all you have to do is look at BRICS. You know, you've got 84 countries standing in line to join. Turkey, which has been a paper alive, frankly, for some time, is effectively joined the Russian, Chinese, Shanghai Cooperation Council / BRICS community. And it's growing fast. And pretty soon, you know, the Anglosphere with some of the West European states, they'll be the only ones that are not members of it and part of it. And now I'm hearing stupid things, you know, from the Trump camp about we'll punish anybody who refuses to use the dollar. Well, that's absurd, but that's where we're headed right now. We think entirely in terms of punishing, bullying, threatening. We don't understand. That's over. The world has changed. It's not going to take it anymore. And by Little Bighorn, I mean that Custer rode out to find Indians because his view was that if he didn't find them and pin them down, that they would escape. And he never thought that he was going to find very many. He rode out. He found that virtually every Indian within hundreds of miles was present, and they made short work of him. I think that Israel is on the road to the Little Bighorn, only it's in the Middle East. Virtually everyone in the region has turned against Israel. I mean, we were looking at headlines for several weeks. Oh, the quote unquote good Arabs are supporting Israel. What they really meant is that our billions of dollars were bribing them to stay out. It looks like the bribes no longer work, and there's no one in the region who is going to lend a hand to Israel, except for, of course, the United States. And we're not even resident there, which means that anything we do has to be done over a very great distance. So I think the point now is that Israel is not only a pariah state, it's now, with the exception of the United States, largely alone in this war of Israel against all.
Colonel, when you speak of U.S. bribes in the region, I think you're probably talking about Jordan and Egypt.
No, I'm talking about several others beyond Jordan and Egypt. We send billions of dollars to many of the countries in the region. Obviously, Egypt is the biggest recipient, but Jordan as well. And I don't think there's much we can do about it. We've bribed as much as we can. It's now become a matter of, I think, survival and also a sense of self-worth. I mean, how do you support the larger Arab cause, which is, whether we like it or not, bound up with the Palestinian matter and still maintain relations with Israel? You can't. In fact, this morning, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia came out and said, it's time to hold the Israelis accountable for their criminal acts, and that the leadership of Israel should be held liable and appear before an international court for the crimes they've committed. I don't think we've ever heard anything like that from the Saudis.
This was the same Crown Prince who was within inches, if you'll accept that analogy, of normalizing relationships with Israel prior to October 7th and what the Israelis did in response, right?
Yeah, precisely.
If this is the Little Bighorn moment, and if Prime Minister Netanyahu and the IDF are George Armstrong Custer and his cavalry, who are the Indians?
I think everybody in the region. That's the point. Iranians, Arabs, Turks. And the reason I say Turks is the Turks have increasingly prepared themselves for the very high probability that they will confront Israeli forces. And they've sent 2 ships to evacuate their citizens from Lebanon. Those ships are prepared for the worst case scenario. There are aircraft on the ground in Turkey ready to launch in the event that those ships are brought under attack, which is not by any means a remote possibility. So I think you've got everyone that's essentially in the region that's against Israel. Some will be direct participants and some will not. And I think everyone is waiting for what they now think is inevitable, which is a massive response by the Israelis against Iran. And I think that Mr. Netanyahu will throw everything he's got except the kitchen sink at Iran.
Hey, business owners, wake up. Right now is the time to get your act together. Let me tell you something. With this economy the way.
And will the United States join him? Because Iran is going to be confronted by the most sophisticated Russian air defense system, is it not?
Well, it's a very sophisticated system, and they have hastily assembled it. When I say hasty, this is something that has not been thoroughly tested on the ground in Iran.
Thank you for joining the Brother L Show. Make sure to visit us at www.brotherl.com. Peace.